Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat.
Thank
I
you.
am here today with Brooke Sprowl. Hey
Hello.
everybody, I hope you're just tuning in here. I hear a little bit of an echo, so we're just going to get it off of here. And now we're good. All right. Brooke Sprowl is the founder and CEO and clinical director of My LA Therapy, a mid-sized therapy practice providing a wide range of counseling services for individuals, families, and couples. In addition to providing psychotherapy to her clients, she trains and oversees a team of other licensed therapists. Holding a master's in clinical social welfare with a specialization in mental health from UCLA and a bachelor's degree in neuroscience and Spanish from USC gives her a strong foundation for understanding the brain, biology, communication, relationships, and human behavior. Thank God somebody's got that degree. Her primary clinical specializations are depression, anxiety, relationships, codependency, and trauma. But she also offers treatment for concerns ranging from PTSD and sexual assault to OCD and LGBTQ issues. Brooke has been featured for her mental health and relationship expertise in Social Work Today, Bustle, Mel Magazine, Martha Stewart Weddings, Voyage LA Magazine, Complex.com, and the Child Law Help Center on topics ranging from co-parenting strategies, sexual assault, the effects of student loan debt on mental health, and healthy communication for couples. She is in the early stages of publication for her new book, Why Should You Date Emotionally Unavailable Men? Using your unhealthy relationships to transform yourself and your love life. And I have to finish this because I'm just really impressed. In addition to her clinical work, Brooke is a published award-winning poet who has been featured in venues across LA for her original work. And she is a AA rated beach volleyball player. Welcome, Brooke, to the show.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm glad we were able to get this going after some technical difficulties this morning.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I mean, it's been a little crazy.
yeah.
So, so everybody, you can see me, right?
Yeah, I'm wondering if
Can you
mine.
see me? All right. I found you again. I couldn't find you on the camera. Oh my God. All right. So we had a little technical difficulties. We got our time zone skewed a little bit. So we're all good and ready to roll now. And make sure if you guys have any types of questions after hearing Brooke's extensive bio that you ask them in the news feed, and we'll try to have a little Q&A about 10 minutes towards the hour. So make sure to type some questions in there. We might hit them a little early, we'll see. But I just want to ask Brooke just a few questions to kind of start it off. And we'll get right to the heart of the matter. In a relationship, let's say, and I think I've seen this many times, not just in maybe your romantic relationships, but also it could be even at work, friendships, different. Why do people have power struggles, and how is that a red flag?
The power struggles kind of stem from our egos, right? We want to be right, and we're afraid to look at criticism because it makes us feel like maybe our worst fears about ourselves are true. There's something wrong with us. A truly confident person can take criticism and not see it as a reflection of who they are at their core. It doesn't threaten them. They can go, oh yeah, I have this weakness, I have this flaw, I can see that. When we're insecure, we feel like we need to have power. When we feel out of control in our own hearts, we feel like we need to control other people to feel okay inside. And so there's this power struggle that emerges between two insecure people who are vying for, control on the in the external realm rather than kind of working on what needs to be worked on internally.
So how can the person that is, I guess, wanting to dominate, because I see this in my dogs, I have to say, I have a new little puppy and we have an older dog. The new puppy is named Snickers. The older dog is Peanut. And Peanut is just gentle, easygoing, just wants to hang out. And Snickers wants to dominate Peanut. And she gets up on her, she puts her hands over her eyes, and she like nips at her tail, and she's like doing the light tap over and over, trying to instigate, like, but I'm seeing it as she's wanting to she wants to play, but it seems like she wants to dominate.
Yeah.
Now, I think people do this somewhat. They want to dominate in the relationship. And how can they work on then, if they are wanting to dominate, is that always a sign of insecurity?
I think so. I think there's a compensation there. It's like, I don't feel good, and this will make me have a false sense of control. If I can get this person to do what I want, if I can get them to bend to my will, then I'll feel okay. But of course, the next moment, even if they do get you to do that, that goes away. So it's a fleeting sense of relief for the person.
Okay.
It's almost like a drug. It's like, okay, I got my fix, and then the next moment it's gone. So sorry, my alarm. So it's the main feature. You asked about how to work on this. The main thing that in order to work on this that we need to do is regulate anxiety. When our anxiety is high, it brings out the worst in us. When we feel threatened, you're speaking about dogs. It's like snarling dog syndrome. The snarling dog isn't necessarily mean, it's afraid. And so people who need to dominate, they're actually terrified. And it's a way to make them feel like they're in control when they're afraid. And so managing anxiety is the central feature of kind of dealing with your feelings, facing them, and helping you to kind of surrender control in your life. So I think that focusing on anxiety regulation is a really important thing.
Okay, I really like that. Now, for the partner that's possibly the one that is feeling like what they're doing is fine, and why does this person always want to control or dominate what I do? What is a solution for them as they're in this relationship?
Yeah, so in my book, I talk about there's two different kinds of, quote, unavailable men. There's the kind of unavailable man that is truly abusive, that's sort of like beyond hope, and then there's the type of unavailable man that's provoked by things that we're doing that are, we don't realize we're being manipulative or passive or indirect or critical, nagging. And that guy withdraws in response to our behavior. Whereas there's the kind of guy that no matter how perfect we are, he's always going to still play games, and he's always, going to be distant. So in terms of the other person's role, in order to see the relationship clearly, you have to stop doing the things that you're doing. You have to stop bringing to the table your contributions to the relationship, right? So if, for example, and that again, it all goes back to anxiety regulation. When we regulate our anxiety, we can communicate in ways that are authentic and vulnerable and kind, with humor, giving people the benefit of the doubt, owning our role, and also, not letting the other person off the hook. Whereas when we're anxious, we're attacking, everything's distorted. It feels like the worst case scenario, very black and white. It's a relic of our nervous systems, in evolution. That fight or flight mode comes up, and we feel like physically threatened, almost in danger. And so of course, the teeth are going to come out in those moments. And so if we don't regulate our anxiety, it's inevitable that we're going to have these knockdown, drag out fights with people. And if we do, that helps us hold our ground. And then we can see what's there. Am I really being calm and secure and kind and fair in my communication? And does this person still come back with abuse? Then suddenly we go, wow, this really isn't working. Whereas when we engage, we can't see clearly what we have because we know on some level that we're responsible, so we can't fully let the other person off the hook. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes complete sense. And it kind of goes along with something you had written about, where basically it's circular casualty, like where,
Circular
I don't know
causality.
if I said that right.
Circular causality. Hmm.
Okay, I was like, wait a minute, casualty. It sounds like somebody like was a casualty in the relationship. Then I went back and looked at the word again. I'm like, okay, apparently I've never actually heard of it before, but I kind of understood it when I looked at the definition, because it was like there is cause and effect.
Yeah.
If I do this, like, if I don't know, I almost feel like I see it in people's relationship where if you try to tell them what to do and control them, then they want to control you back,
Yeah.
or whatever example you want to use. There's cause and effect. Can you explain that, what the term means and how it affects our relationships?
Yeah, so the term circular causality is a real important concept that I use in couples therapy. It's the idea that your behavior is both the cause of and caused by the other person's behavior. And so we think that our partner's behaviors are occurring in a vacuum, like he's just being a jerk for no reason. It's like, well, wait a second, how are you provoking that? How are you pushing him away? That's a big part of what my book talks about, is taking responsibility for what we are bringing to the table. This person, almost inevitably we are contributing to, and in part the cause of whatever dynamics we find ourselves in our relationships. An example I like to use, is when I used to play beach volleyball competitively. I had a regular partner, and she would. I felt I didn't understand why, even when I would give her a perfect, she was such a strong player. She was better than me, quite frankly. But somehow, even when I gave her a perfect pass, she would set me over the net. And I was getting so upset because I was going, there's nothing I'm doing wrong here. I'm giving her a perfect pass and then I'm not touching the ball. How could I be at fault for this? There was like no room in my mind that could possibly be something that was my fault. And then when we talked about it, she was like, you rush up to the net, leaving me no margin for error. So even though I wasn't touching the ball and I had given her a good pass, she had no room to set me. And so it forced her to often go over the net. And so then when I started hanging back and taking an approach and giving her room, she would set me perfectly every time. So it's such a perfect example of, we have these blind spots where we go, no, I couldn't possibly be. I couldn't possibly be, because we don't, as a result, usually of, quite often the ways we observed our parents communicate growing up, we don't have the skills, we don't have the awareness to see, what we're doing to contribute to the problems of relationships. We don't have certain tools. We don't know there's another way. So we're using all the tools at our disposal. And then when they don't work, we go, oh, he's a jerk. When really, like, we're being jerks quite a lot of the time without seeing it.
That makes complete sense.
And part of the problem is that really prolongs relationships that aren't working, because you just get into this, I'm done, when you're not really done, and then you get back together. And, when you really just surrender and stay in a relationship, and really find out what's there, then when you're done, you can move on with real peace and closure. You don't have to wonder, you don't go into this back and forth and getting back together in games and all that crazy fun stuff that I'm sure we've all experienced at one point.
Well, what about like the way people fight? Like, there's so many different ways. You've got the passive aggressive that doesn't speak, the slamming of doors,
Yeah.
what?
Punisher, yeah.
The Punisher.
The Vanisher, yeah. So there's all these different ways that we communicate, and part of what makes a good partnership, I mean, one of the most defining features of a healthy relationship in any form is the ability to communicate, and how it's the fights we're in are never really about the fight. Like, we always think, I'm fighting about, the kids, or I'm fighting about the, money or whatever, but it's actually not usually about those things. It's more about power. Do we feel like equals? Are we listening to each other? How are we communicating? I have like a joke to myself that I'm going to write a book called "The Dishwasher is Not a Proxy for Love," because I have, in every couples therapy session I've been in, probably over the last, not every session, but with every couple, With every couple at one point or another, they have fought intensely about the dishwasher.
Oh
And
my gosh, I believe it.
it's a great example of this phenomenon that I'm talking about, that the fight isn't really about what you think it is, because with dishes, it's so trivial. When it's kids, when it's money, you go, oh no, that's the thing. The thing really matters. And it does. But again, it's an illusion. It's not really about those things. It's really about how we're communicating. Are we hearing each other out? Are we listening? Are we being vulnerable? Are we attacking? Are we punishing? Are we withdrawing? You know, those are the, that's what makes or breaks a relationship, is the how, more than the what.
I mean, I really believe that, truly, truly. Um, I think having been on the brunt end of like different relationships over time where a person wants to punish or they don't talk to you for days, I can tell you that is just not a good. You are communicating. You're communicating that you're angry, but it doesn't really solve the actual problem.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're hinting at something that we haven't spelled out yet, which is, so there's different attachment styles. And in my book, and I'm kind of developing my own terminology for this stuff, but in my book, I talk about, the different attachment styles. One of which is insecure or preoccupied attachment. And for people with preoccupied attachment, I call them Velcro people. We want to cling when we feel unsafe. We need constant proximity to feel okay in a relationship. That's what helps us feel okay. Now, for people on the other end of the spectrum, the avoidant attachment types, I call them vanishers. They're people who need space when they feel unsafe. They need, that distance to self-regulate. And it's almost inevitable when we haven't dealt with, our own attachment issues, that we find someone with a complementary attachment style. And that goes back to your power struggle question of, this kind of push-pull between the two needs. I need space. Well, I need reassurance and togetherness. And how do we manage that together? So for each person, I think that for the vanishing type, what they can do to help in their partnerships is to give their partners verbal cues. Hey, I care about you. I want to work this out with you. I need a few days to just kind of get my head on straight, but I will call you, and then the other person can kind of tolerate that a little better. It's when they disappear and there's no words that, that really triggers the kind of Velcro types. And
That's a good term.
Yeah, I've been working on my terminology all week, so thank you. That's my first test run of it. Because
I'm the vanisher.
no, it's not the book written. I mean, it's written, but I'm kind of trying to develop my own like terminology for these concepts that have become a little stale, like preoccupied attachment. It's like, so I'm trying to make it a little more interesting and something that you can kind of.
Well, you made me understand it in one word.
Oh, good. Well, I did my job. My brainstorming friend helped.
Well, yeah.
He actually came up with Velcro. I should give him credit for that.
Well, that's so good. So good. I know people are throwing around the term narcissism a lot.
Oh, I like the word.
Everybody's a narcissist or a psycho, or they're entitled. They feel like they're entitled to everything. And it's like our era has thrown these words around a lot. Women are taught that narcissism and entitlement are strength and confidence, much to the destruction of the relationships, you say. So can you explain to me why narcissism and entitlement, and we're mistaking them as strength and confidence, are ruining our relationships?
Sure. So yeah, I have a book a chapter in the book called The Myth of the Strong Woman. And it's this cultural message that we've received. And I call it the goddess mentality. It's like, I'm a goddess, you should worship at my feet. And that like, you read 20 self-help books and they'll tell you to invoke this attitude of, I'm a queen, bow to me, sort of wait on me hand and foot. And if a guy talked to us like that, oh my God, we'd be like, get that out of here.
Well, you wouldn't want them probably if they were your lapdog. I mean,
yeah, well, sure. I mean, so my basic definition of narcissism, and I use the term very loosely because I think we all have, elements of narcissism in us to greater and lesser degrees. And that's just a, part of life.
Right, because that, yeah. I mean, you care about you more than somebody else probably, does.
Right. Well, my basic definition of narcissism is that we have a deep-seated insecurity and we compensate with overconfidence. And so, that's what I think is happening with the goddess mentality. It's like, I'm really insecure, but I'm gonna like sort of act as if, I'm this, strong, confident woman. And I, there's a kernel of truth in this, where yes, of course, people like confident people, but when it's a compensation, when it's true confidence, it's not boastful, it's not braggy, it's not demanding, it's not worship at my feet. It's, it's calm, it's present, it's available, it's, there's a different feel to true confidence. It doesn't mean we have to be shrinking violets or anything. I mean, I probably tell I'm a pretty strong, opinionated woman. I want that for people, but there's a difference between that and being demanding. And I used to buy into a lot of these kind of ideas about, oh, that's what, you're supposed to be kind of demanding or entitled, that's what having, confidence is. And it really pushed people away in my romantic life.
So what about this statement? I heard it this weekend. I was at a summit, which is a motivational self-help type thing. So you come away all pumped. I don't need anyone's permission except I need my own. Now, in a relationship, don't you have to run things by one another? Yeah. I mean, so put that in layman terms for me.
Which part? The second part or the first part?
The part about I don't need anyone's permission except my own. How does that relate to a good relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of these self-helpy type things, part of the problem is that they're wanting to like extrapolate some kind of a like simple like 3-step guide to happiness, It's like, it's kind of BS. I mean, there's principles we can use in life to help us navigate things, but I think that with some of the self-help stuff, it's a little bit of like, oh, this sounds really good and it'll make me feel better for a second. And again, there's some truth to it. I mean, I think we do have to be like, at the end of the day, the judge, jury, executioner of, our wants and needs and boundaries and, what we can and can't give and, all that stuff. So I think that that's the kernel of truth to that advice. But what you said about relationships, certainly, I mean, you can't make unilateral decisions in relationships. It has to be a dialogue. Otherwise, we're back to that kind of power and control thing we were talking about earlier.
Where you, if you have a good relationship with your partner, let's say you're married and you run things by one another out of like respect and, partnership. Like I wouldn't, if I was in a business, and I had a partner, I wouldn't go and make a huge decision without talking to my business partner.
Yeah, you're not the CEO of the relationship, right? When you're a CEO or if you're a business partner, yeah, it's the same principles. And it's interesting. I mean, and of course, sometimes there are things we can't give, but we don't just say no without bringing our partner into that conversation. It's okay to say, hey, this is something I want to be able to do, but it's just not who I am. It's not in me. It doesn't feel right to me. And I'm sorry. And how does that feel for you? And, I mean, that's, that how piece again, the how we communicate, the process of communication, not the what we're communicating about, is really what makes or breaks a relationship. That's where the, part of the sort of good on paper thing comes in. It's like people can have like the same values on paper, but if they can't communicate and if they don't have a deeper emotional connection, it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah. What about all the, like, let's say we're in a relationship, because this is a frequent one that I hear. We're in a relationship and one partner gets a promotion or gets recognized, or let's just say a star is born. All of a sudden they get a role in a movie and they're getting all this fame and fortune, and the other partner is not happy about it. Instead of being happy for the partner, they're not happy about it because it makes they feel less than because the other partner was elevated. What are suggestions for people out there that may have been experiencing this in some way?
Yeah, kind of, again, it all kind of goes back to insecurity and anxiety. And, the remedy for that is not, there's no quick fix. I mean, paying attention, becoming more aware of your anxiety, learning to regulate, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, bringing more awareness to your body. Those are kind of the short term, some things you can bring in the immediate future. But if you're having those kinds of, if you're feeling threatened by your partner's success, then there's probably some deeper insecurities in you and in the relationship. And that might be a time to think about going to therapy and getting some professional help to heal some of those deeper issues. Again, it's a lot of healing is not as quick and easy as the kind of self-help field would make it, likes to make it seem.
I know this may sound strange, but I feel that women experience this a lot because of the male-female role in the past where the male was the leader. You know what I'm saying? I think there's some confusion
Yeah.
in this regard. Like if it was in a female, if let's say the female is the one taking the lead, I think sometimes the male isn't sure, like, wait, that's my role.
What's my
What
role?
speaks
Yeah.
to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time because, we're, obviously, you and I, here we are having a, radio program. I mean, women are out in the world and we're, accomplishing things and we're rising in the ranks. And that really changes the sort of easy formula expectations of, the past that was like, okay, here's what women do, here's what men do. And again, it goes back to, how do we navigate this together? How do we, make sure that both of our needs are met, and some men are happy to take on more of the kind of, housekeeping, kids stuff, and others, really want a career too. And, how do we balance all this together? Where can we both sacrifice? Where can we both stretch? Where can we, where can't we, what are our non-negotiables? And just having those conversations together about, how our values and needs align in a relationship to our goals for our lives, because if you do add children to the mix, I mean, it's not really a problem to have two career people when you don't have the extra responsibilities of children. But, when you do, that's when people start to have to make choices and sacrifices, and can be really challenging. And, there are some ideas about, women staying home. And quite frankly, it saddens me that that's, like, sometimes in certain circles there's a stigma around that, because I think that's
Well, I think mindsets need to shift and you need to let go of some of the expectations because they're no longer serving this generation.
right. Well, I mean, I think that true women's empowerment isn't the idea that all women need to go work. That true women
Right, right.
is, yes, a woman has the right and, you know, responsibility to be true to herself. And for some women and men, that means I want to stay home and raise my family, and that shouldn't be considered a bad
But
thing.
that shouldn't be considered less than, or that they don't have a voice in the household
Right.
either, right?
Of course not. Of course not.
Which I think happens sometimes. And but I think it's just really, you've got to find that voice within yourself where you take ownership of your life, no matter what your choices are. Like ownership, like I stay at home and I take care of my kids, but that can be a powerful role.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
and you have to stand up for yourself, which is not something we expected when we got into this fairy tale relationship where we're all like goo-goo eyed, that you may have to stand up for yourself in your relationship sometimes.
Well, part of this is a relic of kind of the modern era. Like when we evolved in community. We evolved in a tribe. We had 100 people around us and we had people we were close to. We lived in close community, and we all cared for each other and we divvied up responsibility. And now we relegate to one person all of the roles and responsibilities of the entire tribe. As we become increasingly isolated, it complicates things. And we think of all this modern progress as a positive thing, and there's certainly many wonderful advantages to it, but there's a real downside to this kind of increasing push toward, I live in my separate apartment by myself, and now I need one person to fulfill all of my emotional needs. That's a really damaging mentality. And I think that we have to, I mean, as much as we can, try to create more of a sense of deep community and shared responsibility across households, not just within our own homes.
I love that. Yes, that's so true and so good. Um, this kind of leads me on to, when we are in a relationship as women, how are we scapegoating men sometimes and saying, oh, he's emotionally unavailable, rather than owning how we're showing up and creating the emotional climate in our relationship?
Well, this goes back to that idea that we were talking about at the beginning, he's a jerk, he's a worse, I'm not going to swear right now, but all these, he's an a-hole, there's all these kind of words.
We've all said it, we have. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
What an asshole. Like what?
Yeah, and it goes back to this, not seeing that we may be doing things that are actually the cause of his behavior, that are pushing him away. Like, I'm trying to think of some examples in my relationships, because this book is very much born of my own personal experience and the ways that I kind of drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, of this goddess mentality and this emotionally unavailable man idea, and how much that just really messed up my relationships. Because, I would leave a relationship because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. This is a bad guy and I need to walk away. And again, there's a kernel of truth to that. Like, I knew this person wasn't right for me, but I prolonged.
Why would you feel that women are attracted to these bad guys?
Yeah, the bad boy is attractive because of his, well, there's a few things that come up. One, he usually has a lot of confidence and bravado. He knows what he stands for. He knows, he can say no. He has that like sense of strength that's just kind of intrinsically attractive. He has his own life, his own interests. He's developed as a human being in that sense. There's a sort of like, just like appeal to all of that. And that's healthy. And that's one of the things I try to do in the book too, is to depathologize, our attraction to the bad boys. Like, it's not something wrong with you. You're attracted to him for really good reasons. But the reason you actually enter into a relationship with this person is because of your blind spots. And the second part of why we're attracted to emotionally unavailable men is that because they keep their distance, there's so much room for projection. And we're only seeing, quite often when they do show up, they're only bringing the best parts of themselves to the table. And we're censoring because we're afraid to have a real conversation with these people because, there's no real safety or intimacy. So every time you hang out, you have this honeymoon experience and this wonderful time. And you have all this space in between to invent, this false idea of a person that really isn't based in reality. So the distance is a big part of what gives rise to, our idealization of people who maybe aren't really able to be there. By contrast, a guy who's available and there, he's got flaws. It's terrifying. I have to I only get one person. I don't get when we're single or when we're in relationships where there's enough of that distance, we get to have it like in our minds. We think we get to have it all. There's this hypothetical person out there who's going to meet all of our needs, or there's this guy who's going to meet all of our needs if I could just get him to come closer. And the hypothetical is in some ways more comfortable than the actual dealing with
because we like the illusion, right?
Yeah, the flaws and the realities of like a real day-to-day relationship, which is sometimes boring, and sometimes the person can't meet all our needs, and sometimes they irritate the heck out of you. And there's a lot, there's a reason why relationships can be really hard, and the fairy tale kind of movie mentality, I think, is of this person's this soulmate mentality. Like, this person's going to meet every need. I'm never going to feel alone again. I'm never going to feel anxious again. That's just so terrible, because we're setting ourselves up to feel like there's something wrong in our relationships if our needs aren't met all the time.
Right, because really we shouldn't be looking to just one person to meet all our needs. Yeah. Like, if I want to go hang out with my girlfriends, they're going to give me something different that my husband doesn't, and vice versa. Yeah. So what are some of the common mistakes you see people making over and over again in relationships that are easy to fix?
Yeah. Having conversations when they're highly anxious. And not knowing when to stop. So you're going around in circles. You're fighting, it's not going anywhere, it's hours on end, and not catching that sooner. Like when you're in that headspace, there's no point in continuing to talk. And then you just say, and then it gets worse and worse, and it keeps escalating. And then you say really mean, hurtful things because you push each other to each other's limits. So knowing when to take a time out and go, hey, I want to have this conversation. This is important to me. But right now, we're not in our right minds. You know, we're in we're feeling like the frightened dog. You know, we got the teeth out. You know, we need to wait and give ourselves a little space and time. And then let's return to this conversation. We've had a little time to kind of to calm ourselves. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I like it. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I could totally say I can think of many times when we probably as a married couple should have that conversation of let's table this for now and talk when we're calmer.
Yeah, there's a lot
because we're very passionate.
Yeah, there's a lot of research on it. I know, and that's wonderful. And it's wonderful to be able to fight in a relationship and feel safe, but it can veer into, you know, attacking and abusive if you're not careful when you're highly anxious. But it's not wrong to be angry. It's not wrong to get heated as long as there's not that anxiety piece. That's the kind of subtle thing to parse out. But there's a lot of research about this. The Gottman Institute is a really they're psychotherapists, and I think they've been married for like 40 or 50 years and doing research on couples and, you know, what makes couples work or not work. And they talk about a study where if people are in the middle of a heated fight and they just take 20 minutes to read, they can come back to it with more humor and balance and graciousness. And it's really striking. They've also done a lot of research about the what they call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So
that sounds scary.
That are signs that the relationship isn't going to work. And I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It's contempt, stonewalling, criticism, and there's one more that I'm forgetting. But you know,
what was the first? Contempt,
stonewalling, criticism, and then there's one more that I can't remember.
Okay, go through a couple of those and tell us what those look like.
You know, it's not. So the Gottman Institute, I'm not super familiar with all the research, but I mean they're kind of self-explanatory. I mean, contempt is just that, you know, that it's I mean, Paul Ekman does a lot of research on facial recognition. I mean, it's literally just that anger, but it's resentful anger. It's not just kind of like, oh, you're driving me crazy. It's like, oh, like I hate you. You know, it's like a deeper, it's like a hatred. It's just like an irritation or anger with someone. So that's contempt. Stonewalling is when it's like, you know, somebody's trying to push the other and it's blank, right?
Oh, they just don't let you in at all.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't listen to you. They don't care to make it better. And
yeah, exactly. There's just, it's like, I mean, again, it sounds like what it is. It's like your stone wall, you know, like you're just giving nothing, and you're not
like when a woman says, I feel like I'm talking to a wall.
Yeah, like that.
Okay. Or a man versus, you know, it could be either, I'm sure. Not to be sexist.
In my book, I address it to women because I think these messages are geared toward women, and these are common patterns for men or women, but they can happen in any direction. They happen with men, with women, with transgender.
Right. I don't think that I think anybody
I can go any way.
What was the third one you said?
Criticism.
Oh, criticizing your partner.
Yeah, that's a sign of that's a bad sign, because, you know, criticism is a lack of owning our own feelings and experiences. So instead of saying, you know, hey, I'm feeling sad about this, or I'm feeling confused or worried, we go, you're doing this thing wrong. You know, and again, it's an abdication of responsibility for, you know, maybe he's not doing anything wrong, or she's not doing anything wrong. Maybe this is just this is something within me, or usually, almost always, it's a little bit of both, you know. And so the more we can start conversations, you know, you asked earlier about, you know, steps you can take or things you can do or things people do wrong. A lot of it is that we often start these hard conversations with grievances rather than with starting with like an open-ended dialogue. Like, hey, I noticed you and I get into this issue or this kind of pattern, and I'm realizing here's my contribution to that, or starting with, you know, hey, what do you see as my contribution to that? You know, opening up the dialogue with a receptivity to feedback, as opposed to, you know, you've done something wrong and you need to fix it. It's like, hey, how am I creating this with you? What am I doing? Or here's how I'm doing this too. And let's look at your part. Let's look at both of, like, let's not.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times placing blame is not good because you're not looking at your part.
But then we have to be careful, because, you know, then we can go the other extreme where we're the martyr and we go, it's all my fault, and we let the other person off the hook for bad behavior. So it's always about, like, there's these two extremes, and then there's kind of the path between, you know, there's martyrdom, where, oh, it's all my fault, I'm so sorry, where, wait a second, he actually was kind of a jerk and he played a role here too. You know, let's not forget about that in our taking responsibility.
What about if your partner is playing the martyr in the relationship?
Yeah, it's tough. And I think there's some deeper stuff there, you know, of, you know, how people cope with hurt. Because when somebody's martyring themselves, it's like there's stuff they're not talking about, you know, and there's stuff that they haven't, there's a blind spot again in, you know, looking at the whole picture. You know, it's never, it all, even in abusive relationships, it always takes two to tango. There's always a two-way street. And
so with abuse, I mean, because we were talking about problems that are pretty much easily fixable. What are the signs that you are in an abusive relationship, and what are the patterns?
Yeah, you know, power and control is a central feature of abusive relationships. I worked in a domestic violence shelter a long time ago, and, you know, the woman would say, you know, the bruises heal, but it's the psychological wounds that don't go away. And one of the main features is that, you know, when men, and I'm sorry, again, there can be abusive people of all genders.
Right. It can be men or women, I'm sure. Yeah.
There's a higher incidence in men, and so that's why we tend to talk about it in kind of gender stereotype terms. But I should use the word batterer. That would probably be a more precise way to talk about it. And again, batterer doesn't have to be physical violence. A batterer can be someone, anyone who's trying to dominate and control and manipulate you psychologically. And so, you know, that is the central feature. They would, you know, talk about how, you know, there's a lot of power and control stuff around money. Money can be a really powerful tool to control. And there's this sort of misconception about abusive relationships that it's like the sort of Lifetime movie version of, like, but I love him. You know, there's some, you know, relationships like that I've seen, but more often, you know, the women that I was encountering in those in that shelter and over the years are women who are truly economically dependent. And so, like, they may be immigrants and not, you know, and they the husband threatens deportation. They may have children, and the batterer threatens to harm the children if they don't do what he says. So there's a lot of psychological control that is a big part of this, convincing you that you can't make it on your own, that you need them, that no one will ever love them. You know, those kinds of things. Those are all kind of warning signs. Often also, one of the kind of cycles in abusive relationships is that there are these honeymoon periods where everything is wonderful and there's apologies and just love and reconciliation and I'll never do it again. And then there's a tension building phase, and then there's the kind of explosion, whether that's verbal or physical. And again, you don't need to be hit to be in an abusive relationship. And that's something that can be really hard to parse out.
What about, like, intimidation? Doesn't the batterer try to intimidate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, because intimidation is what? A form of power, a form of control, a form of manipulation. And that's why it's interesting, because power struggles is so normative in our relationships, at least in this country. It's like we think that that's okay, and that's not like, that's kind of on this spectrum, you know. And again, I mean, it's all a spectrum, just like I was saying earlier. Narcissism, we all have a little bit of it to greater and lesser degrees. You know, we all have a little bit of, you know, power dynamics in our relationships. But I think a true partnership is a collaboration. It's not a, how can I get you to do the thing that I want you to do? It's let me bring my vulnerabilities to the table and work together.
What are some ways that women that are possibly in an abusive relationship right now, where they have kids and maybe they're economically not able to just pick up and leave, what are some ways that they could, and let's just say maybe they're not being hurt physically, it could just be verbal or either one. What are some strategies for them just right now, right where they live, that they could start implementing?
So when you have a truly abusive partner, that's the time when it's time to walk away. This isn't just a guy who's kind of a jerk when you criticize him and he gets, he pulls away, and then when you're sweet to him, he's sweet in return. It's not a tit for tat. It's a man who is, or a person who is really trying to, fundamentally, that's the essence of what he's in it for in a relationship. That's the time when we need to walk away. So that would be a time to call like a domestic violence shelter hotline, and they can really advise you on an escape plan, and tell you what kinds of things to gather, how to do this in a way that's safe for you. And then these shelters are, anonymous. The locations are not disclosed to the public, so you can go to those shelters. They can get you the counseling you need. They can get you restraining orders. They can get you, help you with resources for interviewing for jobs and things like that. And so that would be the place to start.
So support system right off the bat, like,
Yeah.
because you're pretty much, you need help.
The problem for these, people, survivors of domestic violence, is that, they may want to go to their parents' house, but the batterer knows where the parents live. So they fear that, so these shelters can provide that cover of anonymity to protect them, so that they don't have to worry that, he or she is going to track them down.
So how does a woman distinguish between then a normal relationship problem?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think sometimes they can have an element of the other. Like, how do they distinguish, like, this is a normal relationship problem and this is beyond repair?
That's a great question. When we start to change, when we stop approaching our partners with anxiety, criticism, manipulation, indirectness, when we start to really come to the table calmly and firmly and strongly and say, this is what I want, this is what I need, this is what I'm feeling, we really see what we've got. And we really can't see what we've got until we do that. And that's where we can't, it's impossible to make those determinations until we, as individuals, come to the equation with like security and strength. Otherwise we just don't know what we have, because we can't suss out if it's really kind of partially on us. And again, inevitably it is partially on us, even if we do have a truly abusive relationship, because again, that's we haven't been able to show up strongly and firmly to see what we have and to get that clarity.
What are some ways we can all work on building our relationships and making them healthy by the things that we do on a weekly basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think one kind of fun tool that can help partners increase their intimacy is learning a little bit about the languages of love. There's a book called The 5 Languages of Love. And we all have primary ways that we show and receive love. And when our partner's languages of love don't line up with our own, it can be really challenging to feel loved by each other, even when, it's like, I'm telling you I love you, but I'm speaking Chinese and you don't know how to speak Chinese. So there's like a translation issue. So, I encourage people to really get to know what their partner's language of love is, and vice versa, and to meet each other in that space. So the different languages of love are verbal affirmation, physical affection, quality time, gifts and acts of service. So, for one person, they may go, oh, if, when you cuddle me, that's when I feel the most love. And for someone else, they may go, when you take out the trash, that's when I feel the most love. And so we may be missing each other because we're trying to show love in the way that we typically try to show love, in the way that we receive it, instead of maybe in the way our partner sends and receives it. So we have to kind of bridge those translation issues sometimes. And for, people who aren't in relationships, that's an important consideration when you're going into a relationship, is thinking about, do we speak the same language here? Do we send and receive love in the same way? Because that, when you speak the same language, it's so effortless to, there isn't that like sort of power struggle, like, no, show love in the way that I do, or it doesn't have to feel contrived. There's an organic.
You're just trying to, it'd be like me learning Spanish because I want to speak to you and you couldn't understand English. I'm just trying to speak to you in your language so we can communicate. Like if I decide to, let's say my husband likes physical, then I'm more physical and cuddly. Or if I like gifts, then he buys me gifts. He's just trying to communicate to me in a language I understand. Is that kind of what the language of love is?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. What are 3 simple tips that you can leave with everyone today to make their relationships great?
I think we've covered them, so I hate to like.
I think we did.
Just to summarize, we'll summarize. Regulating your anxiety before you have a conversation. Do not start a conversation until you feel balanced, until you are in a headspace to be able to ask what you're doing here, or to be able to see what you're doing. Particularly, I mean, quite often when we calm down, suddenly we're like, oh, I see. He thought I meant, oh, that's why he was being a jerk. It's like when we get calm, but when we're in that anxiety mode, it's like, he's just, like, I didn't do anything. And then he's just being, and that makes all the difference. So the first one is, regulating anxiety. The second one is, starting conversations with, either volunteering kind of some ownership or responsibility or culpability in the problems, or asking about your responsibility for the problems. Those are, and that can just really change the tone. And then, talking about how I feel rather than, and that would be a third step, not starting there. But, here's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling confused, as opposed to, you're doing this thing that's making me feel, or, you're doing
instead of laying blame.
Yeah, you're doing this thing wrong and you need to change it. It's like, wait a second. Somebody else might feel totally differently about this person's behavior. So our feelings are ours. They're not, yes, they it's not to say the other person's, blameless, nor is it nor should we make ourselves blameless.
I love that. Wow, this has been amazing. It's been awesome. And I don't know, I'm just going to quickly just look and see if anybody left any questions, because I just kept on firing away. I had to close my news feed because it was echoing. So I was like, oh, we can't have that the whole time.
Hey guys, does anyone have any questions for me?
I saw 2, yeah.
I'm looking over my feed as well.
Do you see any?
I have a lot of people watching. Hey guys, thanks for joining. It's good to see everyone. It's so fun. Okay, so you were, what questions does your audience have for me?
Hang on, I'm pushing it. If I didn't want the noise to come on, so I'm like, while I'm looking, tell everybody how they can reach you on social media and get in touch with you.
So we're pretty much at MyLA Therapy. So it's mylatherapy.com, or, facebook.com/mylatherapy. We've got Facebook, Twitter, Insta, all sorts of things. I'm going to be starting I'm trying to get the stupid technology set up where I can broadcast on multiple platforms. I tried to go live the other day and it didn't work. I'm just helpless, but I'm trying to get a radio program going, or a Facebook Live and Insta Live program called Mini Sesh. And so it'll be a time where people can call in and ask for advice and tell me.
I love that.
Or they can ask about anything, but kind of like an advice type show where I can give them like a mini therapy session.
They're going to probably not want anyone to see them. And like, I don't want anyone to know my name.
Sorted out all the details with the technology and the, you know, how I can add callers. So I've been trying to reach out to people, but yeah, so you guys can tune in for that. I haven't quite nailed down the schedule yet, but I'll announce it on my timeline on my social media when we get the technology sorted out. But I'm trying to launch that sometime next week.
Wow, I really love that. This has been amazing today, and I'm excited for your new book to be coming out. When is that coming out?
Oh, that's still to be determined. I am, oh my goodness, it has just been a journey. I think it's just, we're going to figure out, I have some interest from an agent. So I'm trying to get a book proposal out, which is a significant undertaking. I had no idea. It's almost as hard to write a proposal as it is to write the book.
Well, this is true.
I'm kind of trying to decide if I want to just self-publish and then see if a publisher picks it up later, just to get it out there, since I'm already, you know, starting to talk about it. So, but you can be added to the wait list on my site. If you go to Miley Therapy /why you should date emotionally unavailable men, or if you just Google why you should date emotionally unavailable men and scroll through, you should be able to find it. You can add your email so that when it comes out, we're trying to make an Amazon pre-order page, but again, everything is more complicated than it seems, and you know, so that's not quite set up yet. But the email list is the best way, or you can just email me directly and ask to be put on the wait list. But we'll see if that. I'm hoping to get it out in the next couple months, but it may be longer depending on how everything shakes out.
Wow. Well, you just got to get the right people to do what they do, and you do what you do because you do it so well. And I just want to acknowledge you so much for being so well versed in all of the topics. Like, you really know your stuff, and I really have to say, I think people will get a lot out of the interview because there was so many nuggets.
Oh, I'm
so
did your audience have any questions? You said, were there a couple?
I didn't see, no, I saw comments. People liked it, but I didn't see any questions. Okay. If they do, we'll make sure I'll send them to you so you can answer them. And
the cool thing about mini sessions, it'll be a little bit more experiential and less abstract. So right now we're talking about principles, but it'll be like, I'm actually going to give you therapy. I'm going to help you regulate your anxiety. I'm going to actually work with you on your specific relationship. So it'll be a little bit more of an experience, I think.
Yeah, I think that'll be good because there's probably people out there listening that probably have anxiety or may have, a crappy relationship. I'm just taking a stab at it. But this is their first meeting of us talking about the subject. But I'm sure after you get it up there and you have people, it's going to go crazy because, that's what people need, is somebody that can kind of help them along, because relationships, they're very important. But I think that not all of us know or have the tools to navigating a healthy relationship.
Yeah. And I always say it's not, you don't learn a sport in a classroom. Same with relationships. We learn, and anxiety and therapy, we don't learn it like in school by reading a book. We learn it by experiencing and practicing. So that's my goal in therapy and through this new mini session, is to actually give people an experience where they're practicing doing something differently, and in the same way that they would practice a sport. And then over time, the more they practice doing it properly, the more they can bring that into their lives.
I love that. I think it's going to be amazing. And do you do online therapy with people? I meant to ask you that earlier.
I do video and phone and all that stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. So make sure you guys check out the show notes. I'm going to put up all her information in case you didn't catch it the first time that I put it out. I'll also put it up on our Facebook page. And I just want to thank everybody for listening. Make sure you review and let us know what you thought of the episode, and if you have any questions. And I want to thank Brooke so much for coming on, the Sisterhood of Sweat.
Bearing with all the tech issues at the beginning.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank God for editing.
I'll put that one up on my Facebook instead of this one.
Bye, everybody.